Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar event called How Enterprises Can Survive an Economic Downturn. I'm Aram Melkoumov, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of CrowdLinker and the host of this panel. Just a quick tidbit on CrowdLinker. We're a digital product and venture studio. We work with scale-ups and enterprises across the world with companies like FreshBooks, Shopify, Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, and many others to help discover, design, and develop impactful digital products. Today on our webinar, we have Shelly Bardai from IBM and Mohan Gulati from TheoremOne. Shelly and Mohan work with enterprises across sectors on various digital transformation initiatives and have lots of practical advice to share with us today. I've actually been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to interview them both on our podcast a while ago. So for me, it's a welcome back. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be back.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. So let's dive into today's topic, which is, for many in the market, very timely, right? We're going through an economic downturn. What do we do? What should we think about? What should we consider? This quarter specifically, like calendar quarter end, has been very also enlightening. Lots of things happening in the tech community, the crypto market, lots of layoffs. Interest rates are at an all-time high. So, lots of direction and vision in many ways that needs to be kind of realized going into the new year. So the first question I have, for you guys today is, assume that I'm an enterprise executive or a leader, watching everything going on right now in the world and trying to think of what do I do. So where should I even begin to make sense of what's kind of happening in the greater market and whether or not my organization will survive like this period of uncertainty? So Shelly, maybe I'll start off with you first.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing we need to consider is like how we cut out all of the noise, right? So there is a lot going on. There's a lot of instability. There's a lot of headlines that tend to sensationalize things. But I think for me, it's really thinking about how you start with a strong vision. I think that's like the most important thing we need to be focusing on as executives in organizations. So thinking about, what the vision is for your organization and what you want to be known for, and then working towards that. And then from there, if you start with a really strong sense of what you want to be known for, and that's now as well as on the other side of this downturn, I think that's important. I think communicating that clearly to your teams is also extremely important so that ideally everyone can band together and work towards this one common purpose. I think a purpose-led approach is so important, and that you can anchor yourself in what your purpose is, what you want to be known for, and then focus on that. And then when we start to think about what we need to do to survive. I mean, we've been through this. We've been here before. Obviously, there were a ton of lessons learned and takeaways from what we just experienced over the last couple of years with COVID. And so I think, focusing and going beyond kind of the idea of now, continuity planning, cash preservation, like we should have already done that. And now we kind of need a shift and think about, okay, what is going to be necessary for the longevity of my business? And I think innovation plays a huge part in that. But it's really kind of structuring it around how we lead with purpose and how we're very conscious to, whether we're developing products or delivering services, what is it that our customers need from us? And then how are we meeting those needs through whatever we're innovating, or the products that we're building?
Okay. Mon, what are your thoughts?
Well, first, I think Shelly talked about a lot of the right things. I mean, this is absolutely look to the past to understand where you're going to go in the future. And we have been here before, not just in COVID, but even back to 2009 when we went through a seismic kind of recession again. And if you look back and see how you survive and how you kind of manage and lead an organization, strong vision and strategy, right? So vision that's tied to a strategy that needs to have really, really clear focus areas and how you're going to get through that so that your organization can then respond back and fulfill upon that vision is super critical to get through this time period. And tying that to both your OpEx and your CapEx, right? Like, first of all, we have to recognize that this is a reality. You're going through it. But when you're in a position of leadership and leading organizations and enterprises, the immediate kind of default action is, how do I start to manage cash flow, and how do I manage where I'm at right now? And that obviously looks at your OpEx, but it can also look at your CapEx. And the delicate balance is tied to what is your vision? How do you see yourself coming out stronger? Looking to the past to tie that to that strategy and that vision.
Okay. So I'm hearing a lot of good things: vision, strategy, comms plan. But let's try to dissect that a bit more and actually, for people who are going to be listening, explain, what does that really mean? Like, what is visiting your vision and your strategy and your comms plan? How do you unify the teams? How do you get, focused or streamlined towards a common purpose? Because I think with enterprises, it's a behemoth, right? In most cases, like large companies they don't work as quickly as a startup. They don't work as quickly as like a fast moving entrepreneurs building a new company. So there's a lot of innovation that happens in downturns. Like from the pandemic, for example, there was lots of companies that got created that started disrupting the market and growing and getting lots of attention, especially in the e-commerce world. But now that that's slowed down, they're trying to figure out, I got hit, now I'm getting hit now by another economic downturn. So let's maybe just focus on that in terms of an enterprise. Where does the vision come from? Who does it come from? Who compiles the strategy and the comms plan that gets rolled out? Mohan, maybe I'll start with you first here.
So great question. I mean, in an economic downturn, you've got a vision, but it's going to be a strong partnership between the CEO and the CFO, and ultimately your leadership team. The CFO is looking at how to make things work, while the CEO is trying to tell you where they want to get to. So it's a hand-in-hand kind of thing. You're working in tandem with each other, and it really comes down to, how do you turn the constraints that the CFO has into opportunities? And I'm going to just use examples because I do think that organizations that can look to how others have done it in the past, and while maybe they're not as lean or as shifty or as quick as some of the startup world that we talk about, I actually think the mindset of a startup needs to be adopted very much during this time set. And it's the mindset, not necessarily the practicality or the nimbleness of it. So, for example, looking at what's the industry doing right now, and being able to tie that to where you want to double down on and have clear strategic purpose, right? So a good example is Samsung in 2009, where they kind of saw where the market was going with the LCD panels. And the market was like, people need cheap LCD panels, right? They need to get in the quality of that and the mass production of it. And that's where the industry was going. Samsung saw that as an opportunity to actually double down on quality and produce really high end. And they invested, I think, during the downturn, like $7 billion, which opened up post-recession over 30% in growth, right? So to me, that kind of thinking now helps you plan for the future and also gives you practical advice. So it is the CEO who makes those kind of decisions, but it's very much assisted by that budgetary arm of the CFO and what they're getting as input from their management and leadership team looking for these types of operations. And as in this example, it was driven through innovation, right? An innovative mindset.
Shelly, what are your thoughts? in terms of
Yeah,
how
I
do
mean,
you
I
actually do
completely
it?
agree. I agree. I think the mindset is particularly important here, right? So sure, it may not be
Yeah.
practical as a startup, but adopting that type of agility and that mindset can be really important in how you structure your teams and create that kind of culture so that supports this type of change. I think also, like you mentioned earlier, the disruptors that we saw pop up during COVID, right? I think it's to look to industry to see and understand what's happening and then try to capitalize on those opportunities. I think also looking at those adjacent industries where you may think like, oh, this is not really a competitor of mine, but in fact, it very quickly could become that. And I think we've constantly seen that shift where companies are reinventing themselves, and then all of a sudden a competitor comes out of nowhere and you're hit, from left field. I think we have to be aware of that, right? And so not boxing yourself in to only focus on who you think is directly in front of you, but also looking around to kind of understand where things may be coming out of, and then how do you pivot in a way where you can respond to those disruptions. And so if that means like you do have an innovation team where you are actively investing and giving space to having those teams be able to respond to some of that disruption, could be a strategy where you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket, but that you're at least able to respond and think about how you can take advantage of that opportunity.
Okay. I want to talk a bit more about like, in terms of like a downturn, when you need to do innovation to get out of it or to disrupt. As a CFO, for example, you're thinking about like preserving cash, right? You're thinking about, okay, how do I extend my runway for as long as possible? So things like layoffs, come to mind, and we've seen that been happening a lot in the tech world, globally, right? Not just in Canada and the US. So when it comes to like disruption, as like a executive at an enterprise, how and where should I be doubling down my efforts around like innovation and how to get the product teams to disrupt? Do I hire more people, if the performance and the results haven't been there? Or, do I bring on consultants to help me, to think through, okay, what am I not seeing that maybe they are? But then also, most importantly, like, retaining talent is tough because you gotta, give them that confidence that you're going to be able to see this through. So sorry, lots of questions there. Shelly, how about I start off with you? So it's about, the first one was about how and what do you do with your innovation and product teams?
Sure. Yeah. So maybe I'll just address your other question first as well. I think always hire consultants. But honestly, I think this concept of doing innovation really it doesn't need, and it shouldn't be this thing that we do on the side or that we think of as an exclusive thing. It needs to be an inclusive practice to your organization and part of your operating model. So when I think about our strategy and defining our vision and then building a strategy, thinking about how we execute on that strategy, I think your innovation team needs to be part of that strategy and really purposeful in terms of laying out those core business objectives so that your innovation team have metrics, right? Of course, like there needs to be space for creativity and curiosity. And I really hate this concept of like failure, but anyways, we need to be able to try things, right? So I understand there needs to be a little bit more flexibility or agility to how we structure our innovation teams. But with that being said, like there are metrics that we can put in place for our teams to ensure that we're constantly adding value, and that the innovation that is happening within the organization is helping us achieve what our core business objectives are. So I think that's really important. And then your other question around talent and retaining talent. I mean, the great thing about what we're seeing right now is that it's, there's of course, there's been a ton of layoffs in the tech space, and that creates a level of uncertainty and instability. However, it also creates a lot of opportunity, because now we have all these really talented people who are coming into the talent pool that we're able to capture and try to retain for organizations perhaps that are in industry that could really benefit from having the technical expertise of someone from an Amazon or, from a Twitter, depending on where you're trying to lead the organization. But I think the key there for teams or technical resources, teams that you're trying to attract, but as well as retain, it is to ensure that one, everyone is clear on what we're trying to achieve, and that we also have the right focus and the right environment to support them being successful in that environment. That's everything from the strategy from the top, but also having the right tools and the environments to be able to actually create. I think there was a few other questions, but maybe Mohan, I'm sure that's some ideas.
You got through them in different orders, but thank you. Amon, what are your thoughts on those questions?
I'm just going to start off saying I was listening to you very intently, Shelly. So I was like, one of the things that I have a different mindset, which is fail fast, fail first, and quickly, so you can quickly learn, and I embrace failure. And I think in a time of economic downturn, people are afraid of that. And I think that you need to have hope, and hypotheses, an objective, prediction, and an execution plan. And my mindset goes into that kind of mindset. Is how do you start to do that? So stepping all the way back into where we're at is yes, you have strategy, but an enterprise organization is not thinking about just the holistic strategy. They kind of have compartmentalized, and I kind of go back to what is your innovation strategy, right? And this has to be kind of from beforehand. In some of the conversations I have, it's what is truly the strategic projects that you're working on, and why are they strategic? Do you understand your priorities? What are your business goals, and what are the impact you're trying to make, both in the short term and in the long term, right? So this kind of has to be part of the overall thinking. And true leadership, in my opinion, true innovation, the companies that actually have invested during this downturn time, the numbers and metrics, the proof is there again from the past that this actually leads to higher growth margins, and those that invest, right? So I'm not going to quote numbers because it sounds, I've done a number of that, but just practically speaking, there's definitely evidence that proves that to do that. And when I talk to leadership in all the way up to the CEO and talk to them about what they're doing right now, what I often say is where's your mind at? What is the business objectives, and how bold do you want to be? Right? What is it that you want to kind of get out of this? And when it comes to boldness, I think of one of my classic examples that I thought was super, super smart, but I go back to is what Adobe did, right? Adobe was everybody used to buy those packaged softwares and install them into their computers and whatnot. And they, in the middle of a downturn, looked at what's happening in the industry and saw an opportunity, and they wanted to experiment, right? They wanted to be innovative. And they said, we're going to go, and I think they bought this company called Omniture, is it some OmniVenture or something like that? I can't remember the name exactly, but they're a SaaS product. And they used that to start offering testing their product as a SaaS product during this downturn. And that turned into a fantastic plan, right? They actually saw after the downturn a 25% year-over-year increase in their stock price, right? They to me, that was a really good example of spoken about a bold move that somebody did to get out of it. So that's just to answer that first part of the I don't know, you had a multitude of questions here. But going back to the how and the what. But when you talk about people, right? You asked a lot of questions about talent. Man, oh man. This is I'm gonna be a little bit unpolitical here. If you're letting people go, how good are they? Right? Part of my mindset is like this. You got to be truthful to what you get. But also, like, if you're being let go from some of these organizations, there's also a pay equity question, right? Some of these people are coming from organizations that are used to getting paid, an astounding amount. And we've been looking at this ourselves. Like, do we hire this type of talent or not? And while it's very, I feel like it's just a normal part of your operating thinking, right? You got to look at like the current, be able to assess what the talent you have today. I'll use the Toronto Maple Leaf example. You got to look at your lineup, who's on your lineup, and then who are you going to actually add. And, sometimes you got to look at the production. So if, Kerfoot's not producing this year, then maybe it's time to move on. I'm being totally controversial. Now, all the Toronto Maple Leaf fans are going to hate me. But I'm just like trying to make a point. And the point is like, this is part of your regular rhythm of work. The golden opportunity here is you do have opportunities to like, yeah, sure, there should be golden nuggets out there. Maybe you don't have to work as hard, but I would argue a super strong organization wants to invest in their hiring practices and be able to attract and retain talent as part of their overall strategic thinking, not just innovation strategic thinking, but overall strategic thinking and how that fits into your company culture, into your company organization, and how you're going to make impact overall to people. Because I'll tell you right now, if your only go-to is to start carving people down and start reducing your staff and not have any other and take away training, take away all my perks, man, oh man, that's going to impact morale. And if that impacts morale, guess what that's going to impact? Performance. So now all of a sudden your top performers are having low morale. I mean, this is not just now. You got to navigate this always and be very judicious and prudent about what you're going to do. And that includes where you're going to make cuts. Be strategic. A lot of organizations are, when the heyday of cash flow is there, are spending money on things that they probably shouldn't be anyways. And those should be the first to go anyways. And kind of judiciously, again, going back to what are your strategies and what are your objectives?
I want to ask maybe a controversial question here, or make a point here, but I think we've all read in the news about things happening at companies like Twitter and Amazon. I'll talk about the Amazon example just for a second, because I think the majority, a large part of the 10,000 people that were laid off recently at Amazon were either part of the robotics team or part of the Alexa team. Obviously, there was like some also back office, but it was a lot on actually the software and innovation side, and the hardware, right? So it kind of makes me think. My question is like, when going through a downturn like this, Alexa and the robotics investments were one of their most innovative projects that they've been doing over the years. So as a business like Amazon, why would I do those type of reductions budget-wise or team-wise in those departments? And should be focusing on like my core business versus further spend and investment in innovation? So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because like I think innovation can come from different places, but there's obviously that like heavy R&D innovation, which might not be producing revenue, whereas I should be focusing more maybe on like, how do I generate more revenue, right? From an innovation standpoint, right? So Shelly, maybe I'll start off with your thoughts on that whole thing.
Sure, yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. I think that's an interesting one, like what's happening at Amazon or what's happened. It's been about 7 years that Alexa has been on the market, right? And for 7 years, we haven't really seen a lot of development. It's more or less the same product off the shelf that I have, on my shelf now. And we're seeing, a lot of consumers say that that they're unplugging it because it just isn't functioning beyond the ability to turn off and on our lights or set a timer in the kitchen or play, our Spotify playlist. So I think like when we think about Amazon, we expect this level of innovation and R&D to be coming out of that organization. And with this product in particular, 7 years and billions of dollars later, they haven't really been able to move the dial. So who's to blame in that case, right? And then all of a sudden they're doing massive layoffs. But I think there needs to be some accountability at the top, because if this was in fact a big bet for them and it was strategic and they saw an opportunity to be able to create a monetization strategy, then you would think that Amazon would have been able to create that strategy to monetize the product, and we would have seen a lot more happen. Instead they're bleeding, I think $10 billion this year. So I think that's a lack of focus, honestly. I think they had this idea, they invested as we all should be doing, but then it's this idea, how far do you take it? How long do you let it bleed without really actually saying and really having an honest conversation with your teams to be like, where is this going? And if it's treated just like, a little side pet project, then there's likely not going to be the focus or the strategic direction required in order to actually achieve what you set out to. So I think, there's a huge lesson in that it's okay to try, but obviously, if you can't figure it out, and Google actually does a really great job of this, Google's engineering team, when they're thinking about, new innovations, new technology, they actually try to solve the hardest challenge first. And if they're unable to do that, solve the biggest problem that they're trying to solve for, if they can't do that, they're incentivized to actually scrap the project entirely, write a business case as to why they believe that this project should not continue to go on. And they're incentivized to do that. And so it actually flips the performance indicator on its head, right? So I think there's many lessons, but I do think that the accountability lies with a leadership team.
Okay. I'll have a follow-up question to that, but I want to get Mohan's thoughts first.
Do you want to go ahead and ask the follow-up question? I mean, that's okay with me.
So my follow-up question, okay, sure. Back at you, Shelly. My follow-up question is, okay.
Because I have questions for Shelly too.
With everything you said there in terms of having the focus. So, clearly the Alexa, the Amazon robotics, divisions at Amazon were just like R&D spend, right? So as a business, and this is maybe a good example also what's happening at Twitter. I don't know. It's very, different, but, he's seeing that advertising business is not the way to go. I need to go to SaaS, right? And they're trying to innovate quickly in terms of how do I make money in SaaS, right? So as a business leader, when you're going through this process, how do I prioritize budget per the business objectives that I need to achieve? Because should I be doubling down on my core business and trying to grow that revenue? How much focus should I have just purely on that and just figuring that out and maybe tapping every, sink faucet that I can in order to bleed out whatever I can, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of my question, because innovation, it could work in certain scenarios, but I think at times like this, do you just double down on what you know?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, so the simple answer is I think we need to be doing both right now. The complexity obviously isn't how you do that. So I think doubling down on what you know, as long as you're really certain that what you think you know is actually the sentiment of who you're selling to, who your audience is, right? Who are your customers? So Twitter and this idea that we want to move to the SaaS based or subscription based model, right? By doing that, is he actually creating any additional value to his user base? I would argue, no, nothing else is changing other than he's asking for a monthly fee to have a blue check mark. So I think like
now you know that they really want it, right, Shelly?
Yeah. So
really
well, I don't know, right? I think it's still all the bots are buying the check marks. Maybe the price needs to be increased. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think like really kind of understanding what your consumers want, who your customers are, and making sure that you're adding value is important to your core business. And then when it comes to investing in R&D or those bigger bets, I think that's equally important, and there needs to be budget for that, because I think like the world is just changing and all of the time, and there's new disruptors coming out on the market every single day. So you have to create that budget in order to ensure that you are also you're also going to be ready to tackle that disruption as well. I've been talking a lot, so maybe I'll pass the mic over.
Mohan.
There's a company called Otter. Have you guys heard of it?
Yeah.
So they came out, like, I think they got acquired now, but they came out with this really cool meeting software, voice recognition, AI transcription things. And I think of like that does play in the space of like where Alexa was playing and what. And it speaks to innovation. It speaks to the nimbleness of a small organization to come in. And while yes, you're investing a lot of money, and you might say Alexa was, I think what Amazon is saying to us, and I don't know, I'm not in the rooms to understand their strategies, but what I think they're saying to us is that we recognize that this market for us is not a place where we can grow anymore, and we need to, and we're recognizing that, and we're changing, and there's other players in that. And that's 7 years ago. So what makes me think about is, where are they investing? Because they're investing. They're putting their dollar somewhere. And this speaks to your other question, right? Which is like, what am I doing? Like, well, so organizations like Amazon, Google, whoever they are, they definitely have an innovation portfolio, right? And there's like this impact, on one axis is like an impact analysis or a way of measuring impact. And then there's a way of like looking at your timeline. So if you look at your timeline or your horizon, this is something that's well known as a horizon model. The way you build your portfolio is you have innovation that's like in your 1 to 2 years max time range, right? So these are your services or products which are known, but you're optimizing them, and you're still innovating in that space, and it's kind of sure bets, and you need to kind of have your business model figured out, your channels and all that stuff. Then you've got something in your kind of midterm horizon, which are things where you have a lot of proof that this is a good return on investment, but there's still areas of ambiguity and things you're testing to kind of figure out if it's going to work. The big bets where companies truly make is like, in the long term, what's the long horizon innovation programs that you're working on? And, that's where I would like, okay, what has Amazon got in that bucket, right? What's in that bucket that they're trying to do? And is it like, I would say, I don't know if it's true or not, but like they've talked about changing the way you distribute and deliver goods and services, right? We've all seen kind of a lot of that come out a few years ago, where they're talking in a world where there'd be bots kind of delivering your groceries, which is like scary, but probably, moving in that reality, which is like, I actually wouldn't mind that. I don't have to get out and go and get stuff. I'm lazy when it comes to things like that. But it's really telling. Like when organizations do things, what is in their innovation portfolio? Tying this back to the theme of economic downturn comes down to like, where have you distributed your resources, and how have you distributed your resources across that? So generally, when organizations are doing really, really well, and there's not the type of downturn that we're experiencing now, and the kind of the dollars are being crunched, your distribution is probably something like 70, 20, 10, right? So 70 in the first term, 20, and then 10% in the. What organizations tend to do is they start to say, well, we need to double down on better return on investment. What's going to kind of help us in the immediate future? So you see that model shift from like a 70 to like an 80, maybe 85, right? It's like really start shifting. And then like from a 20 to a 10 and from a 10 to a 5, that kind of mathematics starts to make sense. There's danger and risk in both things. Again, it's how bold do you want to be? But it really gives you a framework to start thinking through how you're going to start, again, tying it back to making sure you have your impact. And the one thing that you talked about or asked about, which we didn't really kind of give due time on, is the communication aspect of this. I strongly believe in the best way is you need vision to come from the top of the organization, but actually execution is best done and innovation is driven mostly from a bottom-up approach, right? Empowering your team, empowering those great people that you just spent tons and tons of money hiring and building up, and you're giving them the ability to feel a sense of ownership, to like innovate and create and bring great ideas to the forefront. And to me, that requires really good communication model. And that communication model, one of the best frameworks that I've used, and it works and it's effective, is OKRs, right? Making sure you have an OKR model that can scale down, that clearly articulates and ties back to the objectives, i.e. the vision and the strategy that you're trying to empower. To me, that's where organizations strong, and you need strong leadership. Like if you're going to talk about spending money on resources and you want to take advantage of what you think might be out there right now, I say think because I don't know if this is fact, is hiring really, really strong, articulate, clear communicators in leadership roles who understand how to build teams and how to take care of people. Because right now, if you're going to come out of this economic turn and look at it in a profitable way, it's going to be your people that are going to get you there.
It's so true. I wanted to ask you something, Mohan, that you brought up before in terms of how you should structure or form innovation teams. And you mentioned, and I want to talk about something called I think you brought it up before when we spoke, functional innovation teams. So as an enterprise, if I want to kind of think of like opportunities for growth, how do I structure these functional innovation teams?
In the discipline of like, I'll talk about what my experience is and where it lies. And it lies more in the area of like product development and in the area of software. When I look at like what needs to be there, you need to really have strong product teams and strong product leaders that can lead that type of a structure, right? So I've seen, executives actually have like a go-to person who's like on their board, who's leading their innovation track of work within the organization. And that person becomes a pillar for like, whether it's, I'm going to go out and take advantage of the downturn and, acquire an organization and do that way, or whether I'm going to start forming our own internal teams. And I think because of the budget size, you need to really have strong leadership, but a nimble team. And I think they need to be self-contained, autonomous units. And that structure means it's got, in a product world, it's going to have your delivery arm, right? So your development team. It's going to have your product innovation arm, so your product team. And then it's going to have your strategic arm, which is your product strategists that you have in there. Those three combined together form the structure. And what's the size of the team? I would argue you need to keep each one of these units no bigger than 10 to 15 people, right? And to me, that gives you a really self-contained autonomous unit that can deliver impact really quick. And also, if you need to pivot, can easily be moved over without a drastic impact on the overall team structure, because it's a nice, purposeful structure.
Okay. Just a couple more questions before we wrap up. I want to talk about horizons, and you mentioned, Mohan, but Shelly, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. I want to ask, in terms of innovation, can you, especially now, like trying to figure out how do I get out of this, or how do I get through this downturn? Can you really think 1, 3, 5, or 10-year horizons, especially at a time when you're trying to figure out how to survive?
I mean, yes, I think it's out of necessity, right? I think survival requires you to think in that capacity, and there's a way that you can create this space and organize your teams to be purposeful in thinking about those different horizons, right? And then what is your investment and how is that going to support each of those horizons? I think we talked about it earlier, but like if we think about Horizon 3, it really is like looking at what some of these other larger tech companies are doing. Where are they investing? What's in their innovation portfolio? Like going back to the Amazon, like why are they actively acquiring like all of these smaller health companies? Like, what's going on there, right? They obviously have a health strategy. They want to capitalize on the pharmaceutical space. Like, so what is that going to look like? And once they start to do that and they actually start to execute on their strategy, is there an opportunity for your organization to create some sort of product that can become part of that ecosystem? I think is like one way to kind of look and organize yourself around those Horizon 3 opportunities. And then, so always looking at kind of those adjacent industries or sectors to understand what's going on. But yeah, to go back to your question, I think that it is a necessity that we focus on the near term and then long-term opportunities. And then it's just kind of balancing, as Mohan said earlier, balancing that mix of how much investment we're making, depending on kind of where we're at. In that different in the cycle, right? So if we're going into a downturn, then maybe it is really like 70% you're focused on those near-term opportunities, and the 10% is focused on Horizon 3. But I think that we would not be doing ourselves any justice if we were just to stop and just to focus only in what's right in front of us. But I think like that innovation framework is really important when we start thinking about horizons as well, right? And it does, like, a lot of empowering our teams to come up with ideas and allow them to bubble up is super important. It obviously helps to create a culture. It helps to empower our teams. We have, like, we can learn so much from our teams. But also, I think it allows there to be structure in how we approach innovation. So if you actually do have a framework, then you're able to, take all of those ideas and put them through a flow in how you manage the feasibility, the impact of those ideas. What are they tied to our business objectives? And then you have those key indicators that you're measuring. So when it comes to actually realizing the return on your investment, you have that framework in place, and it becomes a lot easier then to kind of manage how you innovate within your organization.
Okay, great. Okay, last question is for the both of you. You guys all have different kind of markets, sectors, industries, so to speak, that you guys all focus on. So I want to ask about the last couple of months and what you're seeing in like the next 6 months. Interesting trends that you could, see that are happening in your sectors. So like, Shelly, a lot of the work that you do is in the public and the energy sector. And with Mohan, I think it's more financial insurance space. So maybe I'll start off with you first, Mohan. Like, what are you seeing? What have you seen in the last few months? What are you seeing like changing in the next few months in the finance insurance space sector that is different or interesting?
Wow, that's a good question. When I look at, like, I'm going to go back and say, if you look at what's happening right now, and I'm thinking of, again, how people are looking at their current plans, I don't think you're just reacting to trends that you're kind of seeing. Like it's always like what we're looking at versus what organizations especially like in the financial sector market, or whether it's insurance market, have been looking at like 3 months ago, right? They're constantly investing and learning and doing. So it's like, if you give me the time frame of 6 months, I would argue there's nothing new. That the trends that are going on are actually like they're well known. They're like, actually, they're being set by these organizations. And, it's all about being customer centric. What are the most immediate problems? And this is really interesting because what's going to happen right now is actually a pivot. And the pivot is going to be, if we're into a recession and we're into the downturn of the market, people have less money to spend, you're going to have to actually move away from where the trends were going to actually understand what are the immediate needs. And that comes back to you doubling down on your Horizon One type of innovations, right? And again, innovation is not the end. It's the means to the end. Right? So I'm just like making sure we understand that, again, trends within these industries, and the reason why I'm not going to start spinning off where they're going, whether it's in the insurance industry, there's a huge trend around how do I make sure that I can give back cost savings to customers. This has already been in the works. What I think is going to happen is it's going to be like a double down on how do I come up with ways to do that. So, yes, there's software that helps you see it. It's a great driver and there's a rating and just but where the aggressiveness and the change in the strategy is going to happen is first of all, I'm going to put more resources on something like that because there's going to be immediate customer benefit and you can get more people onto your platform now who tie into so you're looking at volume growth, not necessarily revenue growth, to try to attract that type of talent. So there's different strategies that you start to employ, and this goes back to what is your overall business objective? Is it volume growth? Grow your volume base so that you can then have a good user base when you come out, and then you can again start to create margin by adding extra value. But this is part of the overall thing that I'm seeing that's going on right now, and it's the right way to think about it, to be honest.
Okay, Shelly, what are you seeing in the public and energy sectors?
Yeah, so I think, so in the public sector, government's in a unique spot right now. I think the greatest takeaway from COVID was that, oh, wow, things could actually happen very quickly if we just, work together to build. So I think that's opened up the possibilities for how government is going to move forward and how they're going to start to really think about how they are transforming their services and how they're rendering their services. I think being citizen centric in this case is equally important. I think consumers they expect the same from an Amazon product, and they're going to expect the same from their healthcare provider or from their government services, right? So I think government is starting to move in the direction where they're really, going to take this momentum that we had from having to move away from paper-based systems and introduce more digital products into their environment, and that trend is going to continue to go forward. Of course, there was a massive shift in how we were acquiring and interacting with services as well, right? So I think there's going to be more and more innovation that comes out of that space. If we think, telehealth, for example, there's just going to be a lot more happening in that space, and I think it's really based on the fact that citizens are just going to expect more and more. And so it's really up to government to respond and start to really change the way they're providing services. The energy space, there's a ton, of course, going on in the energy space. And so what we're focused on now is really kind of helping. It's really kind of the same thing, actually, when you think about it. It's like, how do energy companies, whether it's retail, how are they getting their services to their customers, right, across their value chain? What does that look like? There's a lot that's happening more back office, I would say, back office innovation that ultimately will hit your customer in one way or the other, whether it's retail or commercial. But I think it's just this idea that we have to continuously digitize products and processes to create efficiency. And I think that actually is like a key to kind of this survival notion in a downturn, right? Is like, where can you capture the most amount of efficiency that is going to help create more capacity amongst your teams, and allow you to operate in a much more efficient way. So I think that's really important and something that we shouldn't kind of lose sight of, because I think we've been talking a lot about kind of the downstream changes that need to happen, but there's a lot that can be done in terms of like our back office transformation.
For sure. And that's a great time to actually invest in those things, because you have a bit more time, right, to go and fix things that you haven't had the chance to do before, because it's a bit slower of a period. So yeah, that's a very true situation that I've been seeing a lot of companies are starting to go through as well. Okay, great.
Just want to add one thing to that, because we talk about COVID, and one of the most interesting things, and I think this is whether it's whichever industry you look at, that I previously was in the Star, so I've had experience there as well in that industry. One of the things that was really interesting during COVID that I've seen happen and replicated across is investing in technology, and the companies that did that are seeing 2 to 5x growth and margins. Like it's a fact, right? So the people that actually invested during that downturn into technology are reaping the benefits of that. And again, it speaks to like investing in the right things. You can come out of this really, really on top of the market and be the leader of that market that you're in. Yeah. Sorry, just want to add that.
No, it's great. It's a great way to end it. Well, yeah. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Shelly, Mohan, thank you so much for coming on and giving such great answers and sharing your wisdom. I really, really appreciate it. And to the audience members who are going to be watching this at a later date, I hope you enjoy the content, and please follow us on LinkedIn and get more of our episodes around product innovation. So once again, Shelly, Mohan, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.